family
le
happiness
succès à
and
l'avenir.
success in the future.
Mais je dois avouer,
But I must admit
quand j'ai entendu dire
that when I
qu'un
heard
libéral scandaleux qui a été trouvé coupable de briser la loi de l'éthique, qui a accepté des milliers de dollars en cadeaux, des gens auxquels ils ont donné des énormes sommes d'argent public. J'ai pensé de Justin Trudeau. S'il y a un politicien corrompu qui a accepté des cadeaux qui vaut beaucoup d'argent, des gens auxquels le gouvernement a versé beaucoup d'argent, on parle du premier ministre. Si on parle de quelqu'un qui a brisé la loi de l'éthique et qui a été trouvé coupable pour cela, on parle de Justin Trudeau. Mais pour quelque raison, c'est Bill Morneau qui a décidé de démissionner dans un scandale éthique. C'est un gouvernement qui est en train d'être défini par la corruption et le chaos. Un gouvernement qui a essayé de verser près d'un demi-milliard de dollars à un groupe qui a donné des vacances illégales de 41 000 dollars au ministre des Finances et qui a versé plus de 500 000 dollars à la famille Trudeau. C'est une famille, c'est un gouvernement qui verse des contrats aux entreprises des membres de famille du PMO. Et c'est un gouvernement qui se concentre sur l'enrichissement de ses amis et de leur famille lorsqu'il devrait se concentrer sur la reprise économique et la pandémie COVID-19. C'est Justin Trudeau qui est le responsable de ces scandales. C'est Justin Trudeau qui devrait prendre la responsabilité. Et c'est Justin Trudeau qui devrait démissionner, comme on a déjà mentionné. Personne ne croit que c'est un grand désaccord sur les questions de politique publique qui a engendré cette démission. On sait que Justin Trudeau regardait son ministre des Finances qui allait être trouvé coupable pour une troisième fois d'enfreindre la loi sur l'éthique. Et Trudeau ne voulait pas avoir un ministre dans son cabinet avec un troisième incident de culpabilité. Mais si Bill Morneau doit démissionner pour avoir été trouvé coupable une troisième fois, pourquoi Justin Trudeau a le droit de rester dans le cabinet, en plus dans le tête d'un gouvernement? Si Bill Morneau n'a pas assez d'autorité morale et éthique pour rester ministre des Finances, Justin Trudeau n'a pas cette autorité non plus. Donc, c'est la raison pour laquelle le Parti conservateur va continuer d'utiliser son pouvoir pour rendre le gouvernement imputable, pour trouver la vérité dans le scandale uni et pour présenter des vraies solutions par rapport à la reprise économique. Et nous allons continuer d'être en opposition très forte pour inculquer cette imputabilité. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. Now in English. First, let me thank Minister Morneau for his service and sacrifice. I wish him and his family all of the best in their future endeavors. But I have to admit, when I heard rumors that a Liberal lawbreaker in the cabinet was going to resign after a forthcoming third conviction under the Ethics Act, and for giving millions of dollars to people who had given him thousands of dollars of illegal gifts, I assumed it was Justin Trudeau who would be resigning. Justin Trudeau, of course, has already broken the Ethics Act twice prior to the WE scandal. Now we learn that he personally intervened to direct $500 million to a group that had given his family $500,000. We know he is under investigation by the Ethics Act. We do not know whether or not any member, past or present, of the Trudeau government is under criminal investigation by the RCMP or other police forces. Although we do know that there are sections of the criminal code that very specifically make it a crime for anyone in public office to exchange gifts from private people for public funds. So it will be up to the government to indicate whether any such criminal investigation is currently ongoing. Now, the Prime Minister is weaving this malarkey about a policy difference. There is no policy difference. Both men have agreed in favor of higher taxes and monstrous deficits their entire time in office. There's been no policy difference until this recently invented one was designed to distract from the real reason Bill Morneau resigned. And that reason is this. Morneau will be found guilty for a third time of violating the Ethics Act. Trudeau didn't want such a scandalous story. The reason that Trudeau has to invent this phony line about a policy difference is because he knows that if he fires Morneau for breaking the Ethics Act a third time, for accepting free gifts from someone to whom he was giving government grants, then Trudeau himself would have to resign for exactly the same offenses. You see, if Trudeau publicly acknowledges that there's such a thing as 3 strikes, you're out, then he would have to apply the same 3 strikes rule to himself, which would bring an end to his scandalous and law-breaking career. And so we hear this fiction about policy differences. We all know that it was scandal that brought Minister Morneau down. And in fact, we now have a government of corruption, cover-up, and chaos at a time of a deadly pandemic and the biggest economic collapse since the Great Depression. In that time, what was the most important priority for Justin Trudeau? Not saving families from that downfall, not protecting thousands of businesses or millions of people who were already on the verge of insolvency. No, his biggest priority was to flow $500 million to a group that had paid his family $500,000. His priority was stuffing millions of dollars into the pockets of his friends, while Canadians suffer and while the deficit reaches 7 times its previous record. These uncontrollable deficits, of course, will lead to massive economic pain, job loss, and insolvencies for families. It'll mean social and economic hardship for a generation. But instead of focusing on that problem, the Prime Minister has been focusing on enriching himself, his friends, and his family. Yesterday, he tried to divert from that by making Bill Morneau, a comparatively junior offender, take the fall. But we all know that if the standard is that Bill Morneau should resign for 3 convictions under the Ethics Act, then Justin Trudeau should resign as well. For our part, Conservatives will use our strengthened numbers in the House of Commons and our strength across the parliamentary system to get to the truth, hold the government accountable, and focus the nation on recovering from this economic collapse. Thank you very much, and I welcome your questions.
We'll now start the question period. Nous allons maintenant commencer la période de questions. As usual, 1 question, 1 follow-up. We'll start with the question on the phone and then turn to the room. Opérateur, première question au téléphone.
Thank you. Merci. Please press star 1 at this time if you have a question. S'il vous plaît, appuyez sur étoile 1 maintenant pour poser une question. There will be a brief pause while the participant register for questions. Il y aura un court délai vous permettant de vous enregistrer dans la file d'attente pour la période de questions. Thank you for your patience. Merci de patienter. La première question, the first question is from Teresa Wright from the Canadian Press. Please go ahead. Your line is open. Votre ligne est ouverte.
Good morning. Thank you for taking our questions. Mr. Poilievre, if you believe the Prime Minister should resign, how seriously then is your party considering an attempt to trigger an election?
Conservatives will use our strengthened numbers in Parliament and the weak minority to which Mr. Trudeau has been reduced to uncover the truth and hold the government accountable. That is what we were elected to do, and that's what we will do. Thank you.
And just as a follow-up, if you were the finance minister in this particular situation, would you have quit in similar circumstances?
Well, he should have quit a long time ago. Of course, this is a finance minister who, it was learned, kept his family fortune in trusts, funds that are tax advantaged. He put his money in a province in which he doesn't live to avoid paying the same taxes as everyone else. He hid a French villa in a numbered company and broke the law by failing to report it to the ethics commissioner. He held $20 million of shares in a company he regulated. And that was all before the WE scandal even hit. So obviously he needed to resign. But his offenses pale in comparison to Trudeau's. And Trudeau has done all of that and worse. He kept his fortune in a tax-dodging trust fund. He was found guilty of taking a $200,000 vacation from someone to whom he gave a $15 million grant. He was found guilty of interfering in the criminal prosecution of a Liberal-linked company. And he is going to be found guilty again of conflict of interest by directing $500 million to a company or a group that had paid his family $500 million. So that is the ethical track record of the Prime Minister. It's far worse than Bill Morneau. In fact, Bill Morneau is a Boy Scout next to the Liberal lawbreaker we call Justin Trudeau.
Thank you. Merci. The next question, la prochaine question is from Laurence Martin, Radio-Canada. Please go ahead. Your line is open. Votre ligne est ouverte.
Oui, bonjour, M. Poilievre. J'aimerais savoir ce que vous pensez de la nomination de Chrystia Freeland au poste de ministre des Finances. C'est la première femme dans ce poste. Qu'est-ce que vous pensez de sa nomination?
On parle de la même ministre qui était le président du comité qui a approuvé l'argent pour le groupe uni, qui a échoué dans ses négociations avec Donald Trump. Et maintenant, on vit avec les conséquences des tarifs. Une dame qui a dit qu'elle est pour les grandes augmentations de taxes. Alors, je pense que c'est un autre... rien ne change. Justin Trudeau, un premier ministre corrompu et incompétent, sera le premier ministre. Et peu importe qui on met dans les autres positions de son cabinet, on reste avec ce fait.
Puis ma deuxième question, vous dites que Justin Trudeau doit démissionner. S'il ne démissionne pas dans les prochaines semaines, est-ce que vous allez essayer de faire tomber le gouvernement cet automne?
Je pense que le Parti conservateur utilisera tous ses pouvoirs au Parlement minoritaire pour exposer la vérité et rendre le gouvernement imputable pour la corruption et le chaos que Justin Trudeau a engendré. Et c'est notre rôle, c'est le rôle à laquelle nous avons été élus, et c'est ce que nous allons faire. I just been asked to answer your previous question in English, so I'll do that, and we can go back if you have any follow-ups. Ms. Freeland was the chair of the cabinet committee that approved the $500 million hand out to the We organization. That is the scandal in which we are involved today. For Freeland, higher taxes is a religion. She said, "Amen to higher taxes," and I quote. So it sounds like she's the same as the previous finance minister. Regardless, though, of how you play musical chairs, we still have the same corrupt and incompetent prime minister ahead of the same corrupt and chaotic government.
Opérateur, prochaine question au téléphone.
Thank you, merci. Once again, please press star 1 on your telephone keypad if you have a question.
On va prendre des questions dans la salle, and then we'll turn back to the phone afterwards.
Morning, Pierre. Mackenzie Gray with CTV. You've been quite forceful this morning about your lack of trust in both the Prime Minister and now recently you don't seem to be very pleased with the appointment of Ms. Freeland as Prime Minister. I don't understand why your government does not just come forward in the House of Commons, a place that your party has fought very strongly recently to be able to go into and vote against the government and attempt to bring them down. Why do you still not just say, okay, we're going for it?
We are going to use our strengthened numbers and increased powers in this minority parliament to expose the truth and hold the government accountable for Trudeau's corruption and chaos. We are going to do what Canadians elected us to do, and that is to perform the function of a strong opposition. That was what we were elected to do, and until there's further notice, that is what we will continue to do.
But if there's corruption and chaos, does that not put upon you an obligation as the opposition to bring, or at least to attempt to bring, the government down?
You raise a very interesting question. At some point in the future, that decision will have to be made. Right now, our focus is doing exactly what Canadians elected us to do, to use our strengthened numbers to hold the government accountable, expose the full truth in Trudeau's We scandal, so that everyday Canadians know exactly what this Prime Minister has done and allow them to render judgment at the appropriate time.
David Thurton, CBC News. I would imagine one of the first things that Freeland is going to have to do is prepare a budget or a fiscal update, and she would need the support of the parties in the House to pass that budget.
First of all, what's a budget? There's no such thing as a budget in this government. They haven't had a budget in over a year. They don't even know what a budget is, let alone preparing a budget. We have right now a deficit that is 7 times bigger than the previous record, and the Liberals want to spend even more. We have a Prime Minister and a cabinet that is engulfed in a massive corruption scandal, which they are attempting to cover up. We have a Prime Minister who gave $500 million to a group that had given his family $500,000. They don't even know what day it is, let alone how to present a budget.
So what do you need to see in that budget for it to have your support?
I'm not aware of any budget. There hasn't been a budget in over a year. Why would they in the middle of August decide they're going to introduce a budget?
Okay. I have another question from one of my colleagues. It's about the Governor General. The Governor General is now facing more claims. This time, her disdain for police is driving up costs. Julie Payette is one of Justin Trudeau's signature appointments. What does this say about Justin Trudeau's judgment, and what should Trudeau do about the situation now?
I would just say, generally speaking, we have a government of elites and self-serving snobs who look down on ordinary working class Canadians. I'm not sure if that's true of the Governor General, but it's certainly true of the people around the Prime Minister. They think they're better than everyday Canadians. They think they can turn their nose up at the people, and they believe that they have a God-given entitlement to rule over the country and use the Treasury as their personal piggy bank. That is the attitude of entitlement that we have come to expect from Trudeau and everyone he has put in positions of power.
But does the government say anything about Justin Trudeau's judgment?
I think my previous answer addresses that. Prime Minister's got terrible judgment. There's no doubt about it. He's more interested in elevating himself to dynastic leader rather than and to enriching the people in his court than he is to advancing the interests of ordinary hardworking people, the people who pay the bills in this country.
Bonjour, l'inaudible, la presse canadienne. Vous dites que le gouvernement se retrouve dans une situation le pays même se retrouve dans une situation de chaos. Alors, je me demande qu'est-ce qu'on devrait être fait maintenant qu'on est en pleine pandémie, il y a tous ces programmes qui ont été garochés sur la population et il y a changement de ministre des Finances. Alors, qu'est-ce qui devrait être fait maintenant et qu'est-ce que vous pouvez faire pour calmer le chaos?
Mais il faut reconnaître que c'est sans précédent d'avoir un ministre des Finances prendre sa démission pour un scandale ou un enfreint de la loi. Et en plus, ça arrive, le ministre des Finances qui devrait être responsable pour gérer l'économie dans une pandémie où des millions de Canadiens ont perdu leur emploi, où des milliers d'entreprises sont en train de faire faillite, où des gens vont perdre leur maison. Pendant cette crise, le gouvernement doit avoir une démission de son ministre des Finances à cause d'un scandale de corruption. C'est sans précédent et ça engendre le chaos total pour le gouvernement Trudeau. Donc, notre parti de l'opposition va continuer d'exposer la corruption, de rendre imputable le gouvernement et de proposer des gestes responsables pour sauver notre économie du catastrophe. In English, I'll just say this. It's unprecedented to have a finance minister resign in a corruption scandal. But for it to happen in the middle of the biggest public health and economic crisis since the Great Depression, it compounds it and makes it even worse. Imagine, while Canadians are grasping for leadership to help them get through this crisis of public health, while millions of people are losing their jobs, thousands risk losing their homes, untold numbers of small businesses are closing their doors for good, and the guy responsible for the economy is resigning in a corruption scandal. That's why I say this is a government engulfed in corruption and chaos. We need to restore stability and order, and Conservatives will use our influence and our powers in Parliament to bring that about.
Je comprends quand même pas de quelle manière, en pointant le chaos, vous ramenez la stabilité.
I don't understand how, by pointing out the chaos, you'll bring stability back. Will you continue to request, to ask for Trudeau's resignation?
Je veux dire, sa démission, si elle arrive, est-ce que ça ajouterait pas au chaos par votre demande?
If ever he were to resign, would it not be more chaotic?
Est-ce que la démission de Justin Trudeau ajouterait au chaos? Non.
Justin Trudeau's resignation increase the chaos?
La démission de Justin Trudeau va mettre fin au chaos. C'est lui qui cause le chaos avec un scandale où il a essayé de verser 500 millions de dollars à un groupe qui a payé sa famille 500 000 dollars. C'est lui qui a gardé en place le ministre des Finances scandaleux. C'est lui qui gère le gouvernement de façon incompétente. C'est lui qui est la cause de ce chaos. Et c'est lui qui devrait démissionner pour mettre fin à ce chaos.
This would put an end to the chaos.
We'll turn back to the phone for a few more questions. Opérateur, prochaine question.
Thank you. Merci. Once again, please press star 1 on your telephone keypad. If you have a question, de nouveau, n'hésitez pas à appuyer sur étoile 1 pour toute question.
Pas de questions?
No questions.
No questions?
Merci beaucoup.
Merci.
Thank you very much.